For context, depending on when you are watching this video, it was produced roughly 2 weeks after the 2024 presidential election, wherein Orange Man won by a landslide. Naturally, in the wake of his victory, the progressive left were drawn to their same old performative behaviors, resorting to their regular slews of virtue signaling and hypocritical hand-wringing. One such actor, whom I have mentioned before in passing, decided to go full Monty and showcase a very funny-looking doorstop.
Meet my God.
I'm sure you can work with that.
Meet my God. You think I care about your Christian fascism? You think I care about your Christo nationalism? I don't give a f. You don't scare me. You are scared of me. You are worried about me. And you should be. I am going to continue haunting your dreams, you worthless piece of mother. If you think I'm going anywhere, I'm only gonna get worse. If you think I'm gonna stop making things that offend you and piss you off, you have no idea how deviant and degenerate things can get.
Ugh. Brother, ugh. What's that?
If you think people like me are going away, that we're gonna stop making your art and your movies and ruining the things you love, you have no idea. We will take everything from you because it was never yours to begin with.
And let me remind you that on YouTube, this person is freely allowed to put on such a performance, while at the same time decries others for their own displays of extremism. In other words, apparently you are free to showcase your reverence for some goat-legged demon thing, but of course you can't say the N-word or use F-slurs, and you can't talk about those damn gnat socks, or even make comedic references about whatever list of people whom YouTube has deemed are too privileged to be joked about.
Cyberbullying. Yeah, you say As Dead Domain's video is a 2 hour, how long is it? Like 2.5 hours or something? 2 hour hit piece on me. Yeah, that's not cyberbullying though.
I am going to continue haunting your dreams, you worthless piece of.
Yeah, that's not cyberbullying though.
Mother, if you think I'm going anywhere, I'm only gonna get worse.
Yeah, that's not cyberbullying though.
You are scared of me. You are worried about me. And you should be.
Yeah, where's my video on where I'm cyberbullying someone? Oh yeah, it doesn't exist, you silly billies on YouTube. Like, it's like, we took your content down for, you know, harassment, cyberbullying, hate speech, whatever. Okay, what did I say? I don't know. You said it, though. I mean, you said it. No, we're not going to tell you when you said it or what you said, but you said it. Yeah, I mean, if they don't tell you, then it is just censorship then. Yeah, I mean, legitimately. You could say all of my streams have hate speech in them. Like, basically, if you stretch the definition of hate speech, probably every stream I've done the past year has hate speech in it. Basically every single one.
YouTube recently flagged one of the Smudcasts for hate speech. This is from episode 153, titled Items in Open World Games Are Boring. It was made in December 27th, 2020. YouTube then had me do a 7-step questionnaire about hate speech, which was very odd, and I have a feeling YouTube doesn't really know what hate speech is. Apparently, if you think people in your opposing political party should be removed from society, that's okay, because that's not a protected group. Does YouTube honestly think kicking people out of society for having differing political views is fine? If that's not hate speech, then what kind of discrimination would you call that?
But yes, all praise be to Baphomet. In the long run, this kind of content curation that YouTube has going is not sustainable, and I predict the platform is going to start running into more and more problems down the road when these kinds of biases become more and more apparent. But I will reserve talking in depth about that in another video. This video, however, largely concerns the YouTube channel Synthetic Man. And so, in talking about Synthetic Man, allow me to make a proper introduction. So the mark of a true artist is within his ability to create an image which encapsulates a significant number of ideas all at the same time. As an example, we have the artist known as Stone Toss. And here we have this image. A pink-haired character who represents the progressive left is confronting a man wearing the Southern Cross on his ball cap. "Why do you hate black people?" asks the leftist. And in response, the man with the hat announces, "I am racist," to a black woman nearby, leaving her initially shocked. However, as we can see in the final panel, she blushes, clearly infatuated with this display. And here I'll endeavor to explain why the idea this cartoon conveys also tells you everything you need to know about the appeal of the YouTuber Synthetic Man. You see, today we live amidst a sea of performative activism. Performative being the key word there. In a world where it is becoming increasingly difficult to draw the attention of the masses and influence them as one wills, various activists are incentivized to become more and more performative, all as a means of staying relevant and maintaining their influence. The problem with performative activism, however, is that after the buzz is worn off, what substance is left? Where do we go from there? How then do we go about living our lives in ways that are different and significant? The problem with the current flow of media is that the road to achieving anything meaningful and relevant to our lives is constantly being impeded by arbitrary roadblocks that, even as we pass them by, we're left wondering, why did they need to be there in the first place? For example, why listen to people who for the past 8 years or so have told you that Lucasfilm's Kathleen Kennedy is out the door, when that has never and will never be the case?
This is Disney. This is why they're bombing at the cinema. This is why the stock price keeps tumbling. Nobody likes this company because nobody at the company likes their audience.
What benefit is it to repeatedly enter a cycle of fruitless rage before heading right back into the arms of woke corporations to consume more and more of their slop? At what point do people realize this is not about bad writing and media, this is all a calculated attack on cultural values in order to supplant them with new postmodern values? Wokeness is just the new normal, guys. Embrace it. You will eat the bugs, and you will be happy. And so the steady realization that many are coming to within the digital world is that much of the activism that is being done right now is only for the necessary increase in the social standing of those who convey such information to us. Let's imagine a scenario where we were able to make leaps and bounds outside the confines established for us. Well, then naturally those who are conveying said information would no longer need to be relied upon. Their jobs would be done. And so, therefore, they keep us hanging on the same words, phrases, and sets of ideas for as long as they can until restlessness occurs. Earlier I had called these people grifters, but now I just call them sloptubers. Formerly grifters, the sloptubers' content is made majorly for the purposes of self-aggrandizement, rather than in devotion to a central cause. For if they were devoted to a central cause, they would move that cause forward post-haste, but they don't because they risk becoming irrelevant. One of the more egregious examples of sloptubers as of late was the channel Andy Pants Gaming, but down the line we have less obvious examples such as Moist Critical, Asmongold, Critical Drinker, and Mahler. But there let us even assume one has achieved some sense of self-awareness amidst the sloptubers' seemingly ceaseless diarrheic discharge. The next step seems to be patting oneself on the back for simply noticing the status quo. This is something that Glitch Poachers talked about in his video about disillusionment.
There's more media about marketing and finance than ever before. There are marketers who market themselves to other marketers and marks. Think Andrew Tate and Gary Vee. A traditional marketing team is usually more concerned with their credibility, but for an influencer like Logan Paul, being a conniving and controversial entrepreneur is exactly what he wants for his image.
You big dummies forgot. There are fans and we asked them to do it.
Throw your empty bottle at us. We need to make it look like you guys hate us.
I can't take credit for this. This was KSI's idea, but we got tens of millions of free impressions for Prime launching in Europe.
The appeal is that the audience gets to feel like they're getting some transparency from a shifty celebrity, maybe even a lesson about business, and Logan Paul gets to feel like a social media marketing genius.
Now, the only thing that Glitch Poachers did not touch on here was why this type of marketing marketing would even be considered genius in the first place. Well, this kind of marketing would never work unless you lived in a society where shame had been completely removed from the equation. And so the two parties involved here, both Logan Paul and the ambulance chasers in the media, both have been dredged in shameless behavior, but it is all for the purposes of marketing. For Logan Paul, it's, hey, look what I'm getting away with. And for the media, it's, hey, look what this person is getting away with. But both parties are counting on reactionary content, which Az, or Heels versus Babyface, was also remarking on here as well, as he talks about Disney.
This stuff that we just mentioned, is stuff about the Canopy shit. Those, I'm absolutely convinced. I'll have to go back to my video, but the examples they used happened before the show came out. So this was an already orchestrated attack that they knew they were going to do. This was a marketing ploy that they already were going to do. As regards to, oh my gosh, she's black, she's getting attacked.
Unfortunately, Az is part of a panel who fully intend on keeping the content train moving, engaging in even more displays of faux outrage, which will inevitably call for Ewan McGregor or someone else in the industry to stoke up even more drama and draw even more attention to whatever Disney's next Star Wars project is. They'll just call their detractors racist and sexist and homophobic, etc. And in response, they'll all make even more videos which will draw more attention to Disney's next movie or video game or whatever it is. You see, even after people have the veil lifted from their eyes, all that seems to yield are those who then find it appropriate to revel within their own sense of awareness. Yet they still return to their slop. It's been said knowledge is power, but refusal to act on knowledge makes you powerless. And so even opening one's third eye has zero effect on actual change. Ultimately, what we need to do is get out of the business of saying information is what will save us, because anyone who doesn't know what the hell to do with said information will remain just as helpless to act as before their ignorance is even alleviated. What's required instead is moral change, not intellectual enlightenment.
I just want to start with the usual disclaimers. Magic is not dying. I am not quitting Magic, and if you love that there are cards of SpongeBob SquarePants or Spider-Man, Jurassic Park, Ghostbusters, Fast and the Furious, or whatever else is coming, and with half of all Magic sets to be universes beyond, a lot is coming, I am happy if those cards bring you joy. I really am. You should never, ever be made to feel bad because you love universes beyond cards. And if you came to the game through Fallout or Spider-Man or Final Fantasy, that's awesome if that got you excited about playing this game.
Notice Talarian begins by utilizing language of appeasement, so as not to risk offending anyone, but then later on turns to admonishing the very thing that is killing the franchise that he loves.
This breaks my heart because half of Magic the Gathering isn't Magic the Gathering anymore. It feels as if the world of Magic is disappearing, as if the game of Magic the Gathering isn't even Magic the Gathering anymore, but rather a game that is a collection of pop culture advertisements for other properties, and then also sometimes Magic. And it just feels like gone are the days of rich, vibrant fantasy worlds. And characters that are not just dressed up in a costume, not just a meme or a joke or a reference to a real-world thing. I wish it was about Magic the Gathering and not SpongeBob SquarePants.
Despite said thing killing his beloved franchise, he says he will continue to support it monetarily. And so you see, my friends, our dystopia is one of our own making. We craft the bars to our own prisons. Or, as was so succinctly put by Synthetic Man as of recently, you deserve what you tolerate.
You deserve what you tolerate. All you have to do is not buy the game, and then you win. Is that so hard? If there's anything I've learned over the past 4 years, all you need to do is have subtle propaganda and people will eat the slop in an instant. The Fallout TV show was the greatest example maybe that's ever happened in the history of my channel. A show that was just blatantly awful and full of left-wing propaganda that the normie masses ignored because they were too scared of being called a racist. And also people who are blatantly just not Fallout fans claiming to be fans and arguing with people who actually do care about Fallout.
To the point, however, Tolarian either risks falling or indeed has fallen into his own realm of performative behaviors, and here he must simultaneously voice his disdain for a clear and obvious detriment to something that is near and dear to him, while at the same time he finds it necessary to appease those who might disagree with him.
I am happy if those cards bring you joy.
But that's cowardly. It offers zero incentive for change, especially when those within the industry who are making such decisions are told that their consumers will just continue to engorge upon their slop regardless of how much it sickens them.
Magic is not dying. I am not quitting Magic.
But their performative activism, slop tubing, necessarily lends itself to such acts of self-betrayal. This continual want to be performative, to play both sides of the aisle and appease everyone necessarily lends itself to a lack of humility and a lack of self-reflection, and ultimately an inability to determine right from wrong. And so naturally this will cause all to be ripe for ideological invasion, regardless of how enlightened everyone has become. As I've also said previously, a lot of this is induced by self-inflicted guilt for thoughts and feelings we do not have.
That the normie masses ignored because they were too scared of being called a racist.
And so as much as we'd like to blame the result of our constraints being put onto us by the powers that be, the truth is those constraints are of our own making. And so let's circle back and address the anomaly that is synthetic man. Unlike much of SlopTube, synthetic man has no desire to negotiate with the forces of evil nor reach any semblance of balance or neutrality. And where so many others want to meet in the middle and be bipartisan, synthetic man simply advocates for absolute victory, no quarter. And essentially that is what his appeal is. And the reason this is appealing and why there are increasingly more and more people drawn to it is because the progressive left has been left free to advocate their positions without fear of reprisal. The performative activism displayed by the progressive left is taken to an absurd extreme. Those on the left are allowed to be as extreme as they please. In fact, they call it the new normal. So naturally, the response is to say, oh, well, if you're allowed to be extreme, well, two can play at that game.
I said with Bill C-16 that I wouldn't speak the language of the radical leftists because I don't think that that language should define the game. But let's say it does. So here's the game. The world is a battleground of groups, and they're battling for power. That's it. That's the game. And some of them win, and they oppress those who don't win. So that's how we're going to view the world. Okay, now the leftists say, okay, well, here's the oppressed people. The oppressors, the patriarchal types, they should be ashamed of themselves and give up some power. The right-wingers, the radical right-wingers look at that and they say, oh, I see, so the game is ethnic identity, is it? It's identity politics. Okay, we're white males. We're not going to lose. That's the right-wing version of identity politics. It's like, screw you. If we're going to divide into groups, if we're going to divide into tribes, and I'm in my tribe, I'm not going to get all guilty and lose. I'm going to get all cruel and win.
That is where synthetic man stands tall, making his based and edgy takes, and appropriately so given the mask of leftism has slipped and the gloves are off. And of course, if you too notice something important to you, something that you love and hold dear is suddenly under attack, then why would you stoop to apologize? Why would you gimp yourself in a fight for your culture? And with something so readily transparent and seemingly anyone who is supposedly fighting it is continually made to apologize beforehand, synthetic man stands as one of the few genuine voices who are in complete and utter abstinence to wokeism. Again, no quarter, total and absolute victory. Unfortunately, however, YouTube seems to cater to only one side of political extremism while repeatedly punishing the other side. As of now, this is an open secret and heavily contributes to why even those who portray themselves as anti-woke only take their performative activism to as shallow a level as possible, all to remain within the confines of YouTube's terms of service. And that has appropriately earned many within the anti-woke sphere the attribution of controlled opposition. They are controlled insofar as they censor themselves in response to YouTube's constraints. Meanwhile, say hello to Dead Domain and Baphomet, your new and improved YouTube curators. Now, none of this is new, and often what we have seen throughout YouTube's history is certain commentators will push a rhetorical needle and get certain ideas out in the zeitgeist. In fact, we saw this as recently as 7 years ago when the alt-right were attempting to dismount the skeptic community with their rhetoric, and what ended up happening is that certain terms and phrases were then adopted by YouTube's general community, even as the alt-right were thrown under the bus.
Do you remember Operation Mincemeat? It was a plan that Kraut and the people in his Discord had cooked up. Do you see the two names listed there? Thunderfoot and Sargon of Akkad. The entirety of this plan was to trick the alt-right into thinking Sargon or Thunderfoot were going to make videos. This would get a reaction out of the alt-right. That reaction would then spur Sargon and Thunderfoot into actually making those videos. They use a lie to get a reaction to make it become true. The one thing he didn't want to happen did happen. The most watched live stream at the time on YouTube was a conversation by Richard Spencer with other individuals about a white ethnostate and race realism, with upwards of 12 to 14,000 people watching. I want you to imagine if you waged a war against somebody, and because you decided to wage a war, they ended up winning. That if you had not even engaged in the first place, this never would have happened.
And I'll be covering that in a separate video. But if you're wondering why people stopped using the term SJW and then started using the term woke, or why the term virtue signaling even entered the zeitgeist in the first place, well, I believe much of that can be owed to the alt-right. But ultimately, in order for them to stay relevant, often what will happen is the more popular commentators on social media will just cherry pick whatever terminology sticks and continue producing slop, only having moved the needle slightly forward, having hijacked the words and phrases of those they formerly misaligned. Now, as far as Synthetic Man is concerned, however, the appeal of his performance is largely set on a website that has developed into widespread performative activist slop, where the progressive left continually promote their extremism in freefall mode, all the while the conservative right curtail themselves into oblivion. And so in such a zeitgeist, a guy who makes no apologies for being racist will inevitably stand out. And that's generally speaking, of course. In reality, I do not believe Synthetic Man is racist, at least not in the colloquial sense of the term. The way I would put it, Synthetic Man is a race realist. But those kinds of nuances are not welcomed by the current zeitgeist, nor were they 7 years previous to today. And so Synthetic Man receives a lot of scorn and ridicule for simply remaining true to himself. But in a way, this backlash against him perpetuates even more of the faux performative behaviors rife throughout YouTube, such as Turkey Tom pretending to be outraged at Synthetic Man's racism and anti-Semitism, despite the fact that he himself is guilty of stoking such behaviors. And for the record, those who insist that Turkey Tom was just a teenager when he said all those things, clearly you do not understand where the hypocrisy actually is. Becoming more mature means you acknowledge pattern recognition. You realize that all these ideas of racism and bigotry are not as black and white, a pun not intended, as our current zeitgeist would have us believe. The problem with Turkey Tom right now is that he too is at risk of adopting language of appeasement and essentially becoming just like iDubbbz, building one's empire off the back of base takes and a based audience before throwing them all under the bus when one seemingly becomes too popular to fail. So if we go back to the Stone Toss comic, I believe we can formulate a picture as to where we are now. Inevitably, if one form of political extremism dominates, well, that means that the other will be seen as the underdog, and therefore the hero of the story. And there's really no getting around that. One major aspect that gives life meaning is not living in peace and comfort, but often being arrayed against something bearing down on us. Within such a fight, we want to know who our enemies are and how to win against them. The female in this comic is appropriately aroused by this daring display, not because the man is racist, but because he is non-conformist. He has embraced who he is and is not kowtowing to a progressive elitist. And that has everything to do with Synthetic Man's online performances. In the book of Ephesians in the Hebrew Bible, the Apostle Paul talks about struggling not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. Why this is relevant is throughout storytelling, the forces is arrayed against the heroes are often in semblance with the hero's own ideals. Face your enemy, face yourself. The dragon we must face within this day and age is one that we ourselves have erected. It is a hydra with many faces, those of our government and many modern institutions. What we are fighting is an existential battle in which we are either to resist or to conform. There is no middle ground. Now, true, Synthetic Man admits that he is agnostic, but even so I reckon Christian sentiments color much of what he says. Because even being an agnostic, Synthetic Man at least acknowledges the principalities, the powers, and the rulers of darkness in this world, and the spiritual wickedness in high places. This is regardless of any biblical backdrop for what he knows, because he still notices these things. And note I continually refer to what Synthetic Man is doing as a performance. I in no way expect him to ever act on anything he says he believes in. In my mind, Synthetic Man is a personality. He is an entertainer, just like any other actor playing a character. And the reason I enjoy his content is not even because I agree with most of what he has to say. Rather, the reason I enjoy his content is due the reactionary outcomes that result of what he has to say. Synthetic Man is a canary in a coal mine.
So unfortunately, we have had a couple of rather extreme years of... I will reiterate that I am definitely centre-left. But we've had a couple of extreme years of extremists, mostly on the left, telling young guys that their problems don't matter and that they are bad. I mean, that's an extremely reductive way of looking at it, but that is one of the best ways to do it. I think that young guys are being disenfranchised at a rather impressive rate because nobody is there to help with them.
Although Josh Strife Hayes might not be aware of it, he is talking about Synthetic Man here, in addition to the audience that Synthetic Man has curated. To that end, that includes me. And as far as I'm concerned, Synthetic Man could say he believes in the most egregious things ever, and I wouldn't care, because what matters to me is the performative aspect of his content. He is trying to draw attention to a matter that is not receiving enough attention, and that is serving as a cultural counterpoint to rampant progressive elitism on YouTube. In short, Synthetic Man is doing what many of those within the Christian faith ought to be doing, albeit I will grant he limits himself by remaining an agnostic. Concerning the nature of his content, when it comes to talking about video games, movies, comic books, or any form of media consumption, people like Synthetic Man are often ridiculed because allegedly this stuff doesn't matter or it's not important compared to so many other things in life. And to that I say this: the one small garden of a free gardener was all his need and due, not a garden swollen to a realm, his own hands to use, not the hands of others to command. For gamers or those generally invested in the entertainment media, this stuff is the stuff of culture. These are hobbies, and they are things that essentially make us human and separate us from animals. And as human beings, it behooves us to draw from cultural experiences and to distill those experiences in such a way that makes them intriguing and engaging. In short, gaming is just one aspect of many that makes life worth living. And this is also why there are those who have attempted to hijack gaming as a current cultural facet, all in a vain attempt to use the medium as a staging ground for woke didacticism. There has been less than significant attention to these smaller gardens of society, but if you neglect the smaller gardens for a larger one, then you will miss the forest for the trees. Do not forget your hobbit sense. Do not think that in order to change the world you must first obtain the ring of power and then use it for whatever is deemed necessary. Look to the things within your lives that you can control. Leave it to God to handle the larger things. And this is essentially what must be understood about Synthetic Man. The reason he often acts like Synthler and says his edgy bullshit is because bad actors have trodden upon his garden, and in response he's chosen to stick his finger in their eyes. He has chosen not to roll over and apologize for simply existing and telling the truth. And that too is why I have chosen to use my channel in part to support Synthetic Man in his endeavors. I don't do this because I have yielded to any power of verbal provocation, nor do I have a desire to emulate his lifestyle, nor do I find it appropriate to adhere to any specific belief that he has. Instead, what I believe is that his attitude is what is worth emulation, and that entails never apologizing for your core beliefs and never compromising with your enemies.
People can't even recognize obvious progressive ideology after being exposed to it for over a decade at this point. because to them it's just normal, it's not even woke anymore. And so would it really be that hard for the video game industry to just dial things back a few steps, and then this woke shit is the new normal? I wouldn't even be surprised if the so-called anti-woke YouTubers, I won't name them, but you know who I'm talking about, don't call this shit woke anymore. They've basically already been going that direction for years, and I know some people in my audience have been calling them out for years every time they somehow miss the message being pushed in movies and TV shows. Because all it takes is a tiny amount of subtlety for the normal person to not notice it at all, which is just unbelievable, man.
And isn't it funny that so many centrist YouTube channels are being propped up by YouTube right now? And isn't it funny that so many of them seem to say the exact same things and even use very similar words? Isn't it funny how the word woke is often anathematized by these people? Isn't it funny how all their online engagement amounts to people posting the same tired takes over and over and over again? Moreover, based on analytics without even having watched the entire video. YouTube has become a sea of slop. And yet within that mire of slop, synthetic man is the cream that rises to the top.